Hello, welcome to the Courageous Self-Care podcast. I'm your host, Christina Marlette. On this show, we talk about what I like to call courageous self-care because there are certainly thousands of different ways you can care for yourself. And some of those ways work, well, they all work well, but some of them are more lasting. Like if you're just going for bubble baths occasionally and having a glass of wine here and there and maybe some chocolate, those feel good in the moment. And when the bubbles go down the drain, not a lot has changed. If there's stuff going on the inside that's holding you back, or if there's any self-loathing, or there are beliefs that are running the show under the surface, then the bubble bath unfortunately isn't going to do the trick. That's why I call it courageous self-care, because it takes courage to go into that murky place where it's uncomfortable, where you get to feel your feelings and rather than suppress them, where you find out who you are and then boldly and courageously share that amazing person with others. You uncover your passions, you get clarity. It's all so delicious and important, and it does take courage. So that is why I love to do this podcast, because I have gained a lot of clarity on what it takes to practice self-care that moves the needle for ourselves. And it just makes a tremendous difference. So often we need a guide because we don't know what we don't know. And I love to be that guide for you. So thank you for showing up. If this is your first time here, welcome to the show. If you are a regular listener, welcome back. We have people tuning in from all over the world, which is really exciting because a world full of people, and women in particular, who prioritize their own well-being is a world that I want to live in. I love to get other guests and guides to be on the show with me too, because as much as I like to think I know everything there is to know about self-care, I don't. And so there are other experts who resonate with this message too. Today I have with me Kandice Wirch. Kandice, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me. I am really excited.
Yay!
Your whole concept just so resonates with me in terms of courageous self-care. I think it's amazing work and courageous work at the same time, because when we talk about self-care, it's the bubble baths we often think of first and not the work.
Yes, right. And one of the conscious decisions I made when the download of Courageous Self-Care came to me, I thought, well, that would probably be a really good thing to focus on, because I know I'll become more courageous in the process. And boy, have I gotten to walk my talk on that one. So So Kandice, tell us a little bit about what lights you up and what you love to do.
Well, my family lights me up first and foremost. I have 2 children, grown adults, and I have had an amazing time parenting them. So parenting has lit me up. My home, skiing, health, activity, and my job lights me up. I'm a nurse by profession, and I have loved every second of being a nurse. I have never regretted that decision once. And then I went exploring because I wanted a little bit more. I didn't feel like nursing quite gave me all the answers to help people change. And so I went back to school and I became a health coach, certified in the psychology of eating. And I also became a clinical hypnotherapist because I felt like we were missing that internal change that needed to take place in people. We could talk about the outside, but we didn't so much talk about the inside. And when we did talk about the inside, it was often fractured off into, let's go to clinical counseling, let's go to a psychologist, let's go to a therapist, when really it's behavior change and pattern change and limiting beliefs that need to be shifted. So those are the things that light me up. Put it in a nutshell: health and family and just every day.
Ooh, that sounds really interesting. And hypnotherapy is so powerful.
It's so powerful, so powerful. That has been an amazing journey. I went, how I got originally connected to it was I sought help for myself, how to get past some grief and loss. I'd had a whole bunch of grief and loss in a really short period of time. And I went to some therapists, and it was a lot of talk, but it was never truly shifting some of those beliefs about, why this has happened. How can I integrate the messages of loss and learning and still be whole and happy after. And so somebody just randomly said, well, why don't you see a hypnotherapist, just in passing? And one happened to just pop into my life the next week, which is, I love the beauty. If you take notice of what you need comes into your life.
Right.
And I went, and it was like, wow, in a couple of sessions, I created new understanding about why I was thinking and acting the way I was, and could let go of things. So I think that's the work that needs to happen for people. We have all this knowledge, but if you can't shift your belief about yourself, change is almost impossible.
Yeah, a lot harder than it has to be. Like, it doesn't have,
Harder.
sometimes I feel like we have the belief, or at least I do, that it needs to be hard work, and that healing needs to be painful. And I don't know why I said that's not my belief at all. I believe I believe healing can be really joyful and liberating and light and even fun. And so that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, exactly what I'm getting at. And as a nurse, I've seen so many people when I go into hospitals be disempowered by their health and disempowered by their ability to even simply believe that they can change, they can and make the shift that needs to happen. We've created a culture of we'll take care, and the answers are external to ourselves, when really the answers are internal to ourselves. And that, to me, is courageous self-care, is when you go internal. And it's, I like to think of self-care is not self-indulgence. That is my favorite mantra to go over in my head, because as soon as I drop into self-indulgence, I generally am not moving in a place that serves me. I'm in feeling, I may be buffering with food or alcohol or Facebooking or over shopping or over whatever. Indulgence is usually about that. We're escaping. And if it's for a moment, that's okay. It's when we drop in for a long period of time, or we do behaviors that don't serve us. Like over whatever.
I agree. And that just made me think of something that is an important reminder for me. I love that Brendon Burchard, who trains on following your passion and making a business out of it. I've done some of his work. And he says that the opposite of courage isn't actually fear, it's avoidance.
100%. Just like the opposite of love is not hate, it is indifference.
Yes.
So if there's energy with something, it is not the opposite of. The opposite of is no energy connected to it.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Because you're just neutral.
So exciting and interesting. So I love to get guests on the show, Kandice, to share a current favorite self-care practice. And we're kind of inching our way there, but I'd love to hear something that you do for yourself. And I love to put these ideas out into the world, because the media and our mothers and the previous generations, so they didn't know a whole lot about self-care because it was more about survival. And then the media has really monetized it, but there's so much we can do that doesn't cost money and does cost money. It doesn't matter if you're spending money for self-care or not, but there's so much that we can do that we might not have even considered to be self-care previously. And so I love to get these different ideas going out there, and then listeners get to see whether there's any resonance around it, like, ooh, yeah, that sounds interesting, I haven't tried that before, or, oh, I'm doing that, but I never considered that to be self-care. Interesting, I'm doing better than I thought. So what's something you love to do that fills you up?
Well, in February, I had a really bad ski accident, and I injured my leg. And so that meant I'm out completely for doing any kind of physical activity. And I'm just now starting to be able to walk a block. And a lot of times when people do get physical injuries, they gain weight, or they put that as a reason to let things change, or they indulge themselves. And so I consciously made a decision when this happened that was not going to happen to me. And so one of the best things I do for myself, which really helps with managing any hunger or if I'm having an emotional experience is I have a bath with Epsom salts, which has got magnesium in it, which immediately calms us down. It's the cheapest thing we can do. It is indulgent, but at the same time, it's feeding a calmness within. It's not just an external thing. So that's my favorite cheap, easy, everyday almost self-care activity. The other thing is I plan how I'm going to nourish my body with food. I plan 24 hours in advance so that my fear part of my brain never takes over. I'm always in my conscious thought. So those are my two big self-care tricks that I use every day.
Those are so important. And I think a lot of what you're saying is the mindset around what you're doing. Like, there's a huge difference between taking a bath to escape and
Yes.
a bath to nourish yourself.
Yes.
And even just the decision to carve out time consciously to go, this is like, I'm noticing that I'm feeling this way. I would rather feel peaceful and grounded. I know something that will help. It's going to be this bath and I'm going to feel so amazing. So going into it consciously makes a tremendous difference.
And conscious decisions around anything make a tremendous difference. So at Weight Loss, we always say it's not so much what you were eating, it's why you were eating, and it's when you were eating. And so as soon as we drop into consciousness, that's when we can make change. But we spend 95% of our time in unconscious thoughts.
Right.
That is the trick to get control of our thoughts and to start noticing them.
Yeah, you're speaking about, in Courageous Self-Care, I've developed 12 skill sets, and one of them is mindset mastery, like really noticing what's going on in your mind. Your mind can be your greatest enemy. It can also be your best cheerleader. And fortunately, we can choose and we can shift out of those thoughts that are disempowering and bring them into more of an encouragement place. But it does take training, and fortunately we all have the time to do that because we're thinking all the time anyways.
Yeah, we have about 60,000 thoughts a day and they go unnoticed and they're just operating in the background. So when I go back to my bath example, it's when I notice any kind of vibration in my body that is just not sitting in a comfortable place, that's when I'll check in with my thought. And then if I'm feeling anxious, instead of buffering with something that's not going to serve me, what serves me is that magnesium sulfate just calming me. And it's such a natural calming thing to have. It's like standing in nature.
Yeah.
Like we don't have to spend a lot of money to take care of ourselves. We have to notice. And notice is the key to health.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. Great examples. Thank you for sharing those, Kandice. So we're going to get into your story of courage next, but before we do that, a quick commercial break. So be sure to stick around. We're halfway through. I love the first part, and the second part is even better, hearing the story of courage. So we will be back in just a minute. Hello, we're back. You're here. Hooray. So Kandice, before you share your story of courage, I'll just preface it by saying it's so, I feel like courage is both a skill and a virtue. It can also be a value, and it truly is, whatever you want to describe it as, it truly is the one that makes a tremendous difference between a life of average mediocrity and a life that is vibrant and exciting and alive. And every time we do something that requires courage, and what courage is, it means to move through fear to something that we value on the other side. It's both a decision you make with your mind and an energy from your heart, which is why it's so powerful. And when we get to the other side, this is my experience anyways, over and over and over, regardless of how much fear was there, it feels so good on the other side when we connect with that value that we're holding to be more important than letting the fear block us. And generally it's never as bad as I imagined, almost never. So that's why I love to hear stories of courage, because it gets the energy of courage closer and closer to us, so we can embody it. We can hear what other people are doing that's courageous. We can accept that we are courageous. Sometimes you'll hear a story of courage on the show and go, hey, I did that. I never thought of myself as courageous. Or another time you'll get an idea like, oh, I am totally in that situation. It didn't occur to me to do that. So I feel like this energy of courage is really contagious. And the more we can talk about it, the
Yeah.
more we can connect with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would love to hear what you have as a story of courage to share with us today.
Well, I have a couple of stories of courage. So I'm going to choose the one that's just popping into my head immediately. 9 years ago, my husband passed away, and he passed away suddenly right in our home. And it was shocking, life-changing, instantaneously life-changing. And I remember like it was yesterday, just this one particular moment that was the deciding moment of, well, you can sit here, Kandice, and just continue to not be okay, or you can choose to be okay. And it was almost that clear. So the kids were at the door. They were saying goodbye to me. I was sitting in a chair. And at that time, my daughter was 14 and, my son was 17. And they turned around and they looked at me and they said, "Mom, are you going to be okay?" And I just thought, it's not their job to look after me. It's my job to look after them. No matter what is present here, they need a whole, healthy, happy mom. I immediately made the decision right there. I choose to be happy. I choose to be whole. And I choose to experience the feelings without being incapacitated or afraid of them. And that was, I believe it was a life-changing moment for myself, because you can get pretty drowned in grief. And 6 months prior to that, I'd lost my mom, I'd lost my mother-in-law, I'd lost my father-in-law, like just all in a consecutive, really short period of time. And then Ken passed away, just boom. You could have gone down a bad path, and I didn't want to. I didn't want that to be it for them and be it for me. And so when they said, "Mom, are you going to be okay?" I just said, "No, I'm going to be okay. You guys go, have fun, have a life." And I'm so glad I did. We talk about Ken all the time. And since that time, actually, Ken was not their dad. He was my second husband. I had divorced, and their dad has passed away. And that was even harder than having Ken pass away, was now supporting my children through grief. But because I chose to be strong once, it was easier to choose to be strong for them again. And both of them passed away related to food-related issues, not taking care of their health, making poor choices. And that's when I made another decision. I need to change the message that's out there around what we put in our body and how we take care of our body.
Well, Kandice, thank you for sharing those really tender moments of your life. I feel so blessed to have been brought into that part of life, which is we know it's coming, and yet we avoid it. We tend to avoid it because it can be so painful. But I think one of the most important parts of your story is, like you said, making that decision, and it's a choice. We can take all sorts of steps to get towards making that decision, or we can just make the decision. And that's truly what it is. That's what behavior change also is. It's making a decision to show up differently. And I feel like that is so courageous. It's so much easier to focus on the pain and the negativity and wallow in those lower vibration feelings. It takes tremendous courage to choose to uplift, to generate energy, to be happy. And there might be guilt associated with that because we're here and someone else is not, but it is so important. And I love that you said that your kids, it's not their job to cheer you up. That's so true. It's no one else's job to cheer you up but yourself. And when you can take that radical responsibility for yourself and how you're showing up in the world, that makes the decision so clear.
It was really, really clear. And I'm so glad I chose to show up. Like, the kids have lost their stepfather and they've lost their father, but they are strong, vibrant, resilient people. And I think that was a reflection of watching their mom be strong and vibrant and resilient and getting up off the floor, brushing herself off, and choosing to live a healthy and a happy life. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's like a pond. It was like a drop in the, a rock going into a pond, and the ripple effect, because I've just watched them flourish. And I'm grateful for that's my gift back to me.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think also what's important to point out is that there are different ways of being strong. So there's one way of being strong that's like a fortress, where you shut down your emotions, you refuse to feel them, and then someday they come back in some full-blown health crisis because you've suppressed them. So that's not the kind of strength you're talking about. You're talking about the strength of being willing to go through the pain, to feel the emotions, not to suppress them, and to that's how you deal with emotions. You let them flow through you rather than shoving them down.
Yeah. And so again, I go back to even just the knee injury, like, there's sadness, there's upsetness, but because of this skill I really cultivated within myself, when a feeling comes up that is vibrating, where I feel it in my chest and I need to check in with it, I allow it to be present. I don't resist it. I don't fight it. I notice it and I let it pass through me, and I take care of myself as it's passing through me. I don't ask others to take care of me. I just let it be. The more I resist a feeling or try and push it down, the more it's going to bubble up and, usually cause patterns of thought or loops of thinking that are negative, because it's there. It wants to move through. So I'm really good at just letting feelings move through.
And you're right, it's completely a skill.
Yeah.
And for the most part, it's not a skill that's taught out in the great wide world. It's not taught in schools. Most parents don't know to teach their kids that skill. But just how you described it is, you notice the feeling, you allow it to be there rather than pushing it down or saying, I'll deal with this later. And you another step that I like to teach is to really locate where it is physically in your body as a sensation, and just be with that discomfort. So usually those uncomfortable feelings have tension or pain or heaviness. And when you just locate that and really focus on noticing the physical sensation, you're giving the emotion or the feeling attention. And attention is the most sincere form of love, which is all the emotion wants. It's just a messenger. It's just telling you something is up, and there's no need to tell it to go away. It will subside once it's noticed.
Yeah. And if we don't notice it, we actually trigger that, that primitive brain that gets even more fearful. And as soon as that primitive brain is triggered in fear, it actually starts creating really big loops of thinking that can go around and around and around and create ruts of thinking. So whenever we notice something, we're acknowledging it, and that's conscious. It's such a beautiful way to say it. Beautiful. The other thing I like to say is get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yes.
The feeling is not going to hurt you. It's the suppression and possibly acting out or buffering yourself in a way that doesn't serve you.
So Kandice, what would you say to someone who is in a place of, like, what would be your best advice to someone who is struggling to make that decision to be happy and is really just in the more of the heaviness of it? What would be one thing that they could do to lift themselves out a little bit?
Yeah, I think the first thing to do is start noticing thoughts. You can't change what you don't notice. And so notice your thoughts. And we talk a lot out there about, positive affirmations and those sorts of things. It's a little bit more difficult than just switching a negative thought to a positive thought. We need to sometimes inch our way forward in that. So first step is just notice the thought. Second step is to then say, what is one thought closer to where I want to be that I can move myself to? Not all the way there, just one step at a time, and practice each step, practice each thought.
Yeah, because you're getting yourself out of a habitual way of thinking that is actually, it can be very addictive to have those ruts and those patterns of
Totally.
thought.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
so we use that a lot with our kids. We say, okay, could you just reach for a little bit of a higher thought? And
Yes, that's perfect.
there's resistance
Yeah,
because there is just, it feels so powerful to be in that wallowing self-pity.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so, yeah, we say maybe just a little bit higher, like what's a little bit higher of a thought,
yeah.
begrudgingly, okay, fine. And then they do feel better.
And what a great skill for them to learn, because they're learning that mastery of their own thought process. It's not
Yes,
just magically, I have a negative thought, okay, switch it to a positive thought and it all goes away. That's really not how it works.
right.
It is a process and it's a skill. And reach out and seek support however you need to help you get through and past those loops of thinking. And some of it may be related to, things that have happened in your past that a current thing is triggering, because your brain goes right back to that fear place and it stores those memories and it brings it forward and it connects meaning. So you may need to have some hypnosis or some self-hypnosis or some quiet time, some meditation, some journaling. All those are forms of therapy that can really help us change our thought process.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because often we think that because the word self is in self-care, we think we need to do it by ourselves. And really that's not caring at all, trying to figure out what we don't know. It's so much, and it reduces the suffering and cuts the timeline in half if you can
Yeah.
seek some help.
Seek some help. That's the best form of self-care. And seek help that resonates with you. It has to resonate with you. So
Right.
really be selfish in who you're choosing to help you get through whatever it is you need to get through. Because if it doesn't resonate, you're not gonna make the biggest connection.
Right. Great advice. Thank you so much for that. So I'm sure people are tuning in and feeling this resonant energy. If people want to connect with you online and find out more about your work and how you help people, where can they connect with you?
Go to my website at www.weightbossforlife.com, or you can email me at info@weightbossforlife.com. And if you go onto our website, there's a quiz there about emotional eating, and you can see where you are in terms of your emotional eating pattern. I do one-to-one coaching and group coaching.
Beautiful. All right. So the link for that will be in the show notes. And um, you're working on something to put on your website. Did you want to say anything about that?
Yes, it'll be that emotional eating quiz. I'm going to have
Okay,
that
great.
on my website so you can see if you're buffering any emotions with food, and give you some strategies on how you can change that. So whatever you're doing in terms of your self-care, it's not buffering with food. It's choosing to do something that serves you and moves you forward.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kandice, for that resource. And thank you for sharing your wisdom and your experience and your stories with us. It's been a real pleasure to connect with you.
It's been a pleasure to connect with you. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. And listeners, thank you for listening. I like to give out giant virtual gold stars, because who doesn't like to get a gold star? So you get one for listening and taking action to practice this courageous self-care by informing yourself and going outside of your current reality. There are so many choices on what you can listen to. And I love that you chose to listen to this, because it just has such a good vibration. I love being here. I love sharing this info. I love connecting with other like-minded people. So I'm grateful to you for listening. And I invite you to come back. The show airs once a week. I alternate generally between an interview and a teaching episode, so that you're getting not just the esoteric thought stuff, you're also getting practical strategies on learning how to implement the different skill sets of courageous self-care. So I invite you to come back. And if you've got a story of courage, we would love to hear it. You can apply to be a guest on the show at my website, which is in the show notes. It's ChristinaMarlette.com. Kandice, thank you again for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
You are so welcome. And again, thank you for listening from wherever you are in the world. I look forward to connecting with you again next time. Bye-bye for now.